I was a member of F Force. Now, F Force consisted of 7,000 men, and before we left Changi, the Japanese told our officers that we were being sent to a convalescent camp because food was too short in Singapore. And they said because it's a convalescent camp, half the men can be sick because they were running out of labour. So we got to Lower Thailand at a place called Ban Pong, and I said to one of the Englishmen, we were told we'd be taken in trucks. And I said, where are the trucks? He said, no trucks, Tom. He said, you're going to have to walk. So we walked 270 odd kilometres overnight, about 15 kilometres each night.
I arrived at Conure. We were on the spine of a range of hills, and we got off our trucks and descended a very, very steep descent. I later on found out that it was 500 or 600 feet of descent. It was very, very hilly country. And I did not know on that day that sometime later that year, this was in January of 1943, sometime later that year, the path I took down that very steep hill was going to be traversed by a railway line.
I never sat on a chair at a table to eat a meal. I never had soap. I never had a toothbrush, toothpaste, a towel. Just those normal things that you take in everyday life. We just never had those things. And we never had a tap or a source of water where you could go and get a drink. I mean, the only water you had was what you took out with you to work on the railway. And that had to last you for the day. But I never ever had running water in Thailand. I've never had the luxury of turning a tap on, having a drink. No, didn't happen.
Everybody was hungry every day, every minute of the day. You were always hungry, but you never had enough to eat.
Our breakfast for quite a long while, particularly up in Thailand, was what they call pat, which is a Dutch word for porridge. And that was a watery rice that they'd make it so it was virtually, real mushy. So you get a cup of that, and that's what you went out and worked on the railway on. No sugar, no salt, nothing. And that's what you went out and worked on the railway on.
You were that hungry that even this rotten food we would get done. There were times when I would say to my mates, gee, that was great, because I was that hungry. I was that hungry it even tasted good, even the rotten food we were getting tasted good.
When we first started, we had to go into the jungle and cut down these trees and trim the branches off and then carry it down to the road where it was put on a barge and floated out, and they had a pole driver up on a big scaffolding, and then they had this great rope running across with about 20 men on the end of it, and you had to pull the weight up and let it go. And this went on for hour after hour, and the officer that was with us, like our officer, he asked the Japanese in charge for yasmi, which means rest. So the Japanese officer said, yasmi nai, which means no. And actually the Japanese officer was a Japanese airline pilot. He used to fly between Tokyo and America. And when he was home on leave in Tokyo, he got swooped up and put in the army. So a little bit longer, and our officer said, they've had enough, that's it. So he told us to stop. And this Japanese pulled his revolver out and stuck it in our officer's stomach and said, you tell them to go back to work or I'll shoot you. So our officer said, no, they're going to have a rest. So the Japanese officer said, well, you're a very brave man. Okay, they can have 10 minutes rest every hour.
There was no fighting, it was just bashing. They could come down on you and push you, hit you, anything. And you'd move yourself, it was smart.
So we had a small cutting and embankment. So we had what we called hammer and tack men, where you had a steel rod with a pointy end and a fellow with a 7-pound sledgehammer. So you held the rod while he belted the end of it, and he turned it. So he bored a hole in the rock, and then when they had enough holes they wanted to use in that particular section, they put dynamite in and blow the rock.
And then the next job we had to do was to break all these great big bluestone boulders up. Break them up first with an 8-pound hammer, and we get those great big boulders like that, you know, and you'd be trying to break them up, and you'd have to find a split in the rock. And it's amazing how the rock did form into splits, and you find a split, and it wasn't all that hard to break the rocks up with this 8-pound hammer. And then once they were broken into pieces about a foot in diameter, in circumference, we'd then go ahead and break them up with napping hammers, as they call them, and nap them down to the size of 2 or 3 inches in diameter to use as ballast for the railway sleepers.
As they started working towards getting it completed, you know, the hours increased, of course, and that's why Hellfire Pass got its name, because it's like these bamboo torches or other types of torches have them on top of the cutting to shed some light on the men working down below.
And out to work. It depends on where you work. Sometimes you will work within a kilometre of the camp. Other times you'd have to walk at least 3 or 4 kilometres before you got to your work site. I remember one day it must have been the malaria, but I was coming home from one of those work parties one day, and I started to feel very odd, and I felt as though I was walking up a hill like that. I must have been just about passed out. And one of my mates, I was pretty thin, I suppose. One of my mates picked me up, slung me across the shoulder. Carried me home.
The most prized group of all were the 63 doctors and 6 dentists who work on the railway, and they did a tremendous job with very little equipment.
With no life-saving drugs or even drugs to treat minor complaints, they had honestly their job. They did a marvellous job, the doctors, marvellous job, men above men. But our morale never ever lost it, never ever lost it. We're never beaten.
I can recall a fellow yelling out, shh, shh, he's coming in from somewhere. He's telling us not to yell out, but the war is over.
They flew the worst cases home, and those that could last a little bit longer were taken home on aircraft carriers, but the bulk of us had to wait until shipping became available. And we didn't get home until 2 months after.
We came around the north and down into Brisbane and, and we were there for quite a while waiting for something to happen. Then all of a sudden we just saw a surge of people come through. They'd knocked them out, they weren't allowed to get on the wharf. And we saw them all come through, and then they knocked another fence down further down from the main entrance, and in the lead was my dad, George. So I started yelling out to him, and quite a lot of blokes who never saw anybody that I knew, "Hey George Jamieson, they'll join me." Yeah, that was very, very nice. And then when we got down, I got into a car. They had cars ready with my mother in it, and out to Grovely, or wherever it was, yes. So that's how that day ended. And she was in the front seat and I was in the back seat with another 2 blokes and holding onto my hand all the way. It's really it's a memory that you don't lose was that day with Mum.